Hey everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of Fight Chat Friday from TKD Coach Academy. This week we are looking at something a little bit different. We're looking at a bit of a then and now, as it struck myself and Richie that at the World Cup this year and at some of the competitions so far in 2022, the use of the turning kick front and back leg has changed and is starting to look a little bit like something we've seen before. So if you'd like to explore this with us and see what it looked like 20 years ago, 10 years ago, and now, this would be a good episode for you.
Everybody, welcome to episode 119 of Fight Chat Friday. So we're going to have a look at one of the staples of ITF Sparring, the turning kick. So we see it to the body, to the head, attack, defense. We see it in multiple different ways. But when I started competing internationally in the, let's say, the 2000s, this was one of the kicks that was being used a lot and also being scored a lot. But I think then towards the 2010, that kind of time, it changed to more like a side kick game, especially off the front leg. So that's side kick, and that was one of the reasons why some of the European countries were quite successful as well, building a big structure from that front leg and getting to work from there. But now I think we're seeing a little bit of a return recently, especially after the World Cup. We're seeing a little bit more with people being more dynamic. Shorter stances as well allows them to get in and out a little bit quicker. We're seeing a return of that turning kick again, not just as a continuation shot. We always had it as a continuation, maybe after
Definitely.
hands or whatever, but now we're seeing it as an entry, direct entry, and even people leading off it with it as well. Now it's not something that you can do all the time because it becomes almost something that if it's readable, you can cut them down with the front hand. But because people are just that more dynamic, the game is getting even younger as well. I think there's some younger people coming through. They're still a bit sharper and things like that. The turning kick is becoming another big factor again. And we always say, Adrian, that we see this going around in circles, that the trends and the cycles and the meta games in ITF.
Yeah, definitely. And it's one of those things that it gives you options, it lets you punish mistakes from your opponent, and it'll always be there as a finishing shot off of hands or as a follow-on shot. It's almost the most natural follow-on kick to any other kick. So people find it easy to throw, but at the same time, you have to find the right moments for it. And you do expose yourself when you throw it, especially off the back leg. So maybe we'll start this by having a little look back. We'll take a couple of generations back and have a look at what was running through our minds when we were thinking about the way we used to see this shot. And then we can go to a more current example and show how we're seeing it used now. So this is jumping back to the very, very early 2000s and a little bit from David Kerr, where we can see this one skipping and taking it in with the front leg, just with a quick foot-to-foot kind of skip as a lead leg attacking shot.
Yeah, this works really nice as well when it's left to left or right with right, isn't it, Adrian? Because that option is more applicable with that shot.
Definitely, but it's one of those things where we don't. I certainly haven't in the last 15 or 18 years taught my students that as a go-to.
No,
because
yeah.
the kind of the TikTok version of the turning kick is so high risk, and gives your opponent an awful lot of countering options. But it's the same with a foot-to-foot side kick. At the same time, you can make up quite a bit of distance, and you can do it pretty quickly. So if it's unexpected, it can be a big deal. So I kind of look at this as being almost conversely, although it's very easy to do, the higher level shot.
Yeah,
because you don't want to make a habit of doing it.
You get that lean as well with it because of the foot-to-foot position, so you can kind of take that risk, a calculated risk.
Exactly. So in this case, we have, again, a little bit more of David Kerr, but looking at it as a follow-on shot after a feint against Neil. So showing that front leg side kick and whipping it in off the back leg.
Yeah, and like we always talk about the scores and the visibility of it too, and maybe because of the scoreboard being a factor recently, that shot is only visible to maybe two referees compared to the more direct, open frontline shots like side kick, etc. So that is another factor as well. Maybe now people are realizing that it wasn't as high a value, but we'll see later that people are using it and are effective with it now as well. But yeah, I think that shot was one that was very prominent. I mean, you can see it's linked with footwork and rhythm and angles a lot as well. It's not just usually a blind open shot just going direct.
Yeah, and it's one of those things as well that as a match matures and develops, the distance in play has happened with that front leg even now. And sometimes you're looking to create a little bit of movement to bring in that back leg shot, and that gives you that variation that it hasn't been thrown before this round, and so all of a sudden it's a big deal to throw something new into the mix, catch your opponent off guard. And we've seen phases over the last 10 years where people have brought in, let's say, a front kick off the back leg as a trapping shot to try and catch someone, or created the movement, had the person moving to your open side and then fire in the turning kick. And even that bit of counterplay where you'd lead the person and offer them that back leg turning kick and then counter with the front hand as they tried to throw it. So yeah,
Mm-hmm.
but this was certainly something that we saw quite a lot of, maybe 10 to 20 years ago, that direct back leg shot, maybe with a setup or a feint along those lines.
Yeah, and like I think again, this was like always a prominent shot in the South American countries, particularly with Argentina and Brazil, like we see here in this example. But
Mm,
also, Poland were one of the countries who were very effective with this shot, especially using footwork, like we said earlier, and their movement, because they wanted a lot of lateral movement to create those angles and to create that little bit of a pulling sensation, so you can catch your opponent over committing, and then that turning kick is a nice option off that as well.
I'll take that as a segue. We'll have a look at Daniel Jawa and Ireland's Carl Kelly in this one. You can see plenty of examples of the kind of dynamics that develop when a turning kick is a prominent shot in a match.
Yeah, and it does bring hands into play as well, like we see here. But when you look for that big shot as a exit or an entry by themselves, it does bring hands into play. So you do need to be careful. But we also see it brings into play the back kick and the side kick for the person who throws that turning kick. So we'll see
Yeah,
a defensive side kick as an option, but also the back kick. So they link together quite nicely. You see here Daniel using it quite well. So it is something that works in flow, but it's just we haven't seen the first shot in flow usually be turning kick recently, but it very much is what happens now. But usually the turning kick is just at the end of the flow or the combination.
absolutely. And I mean, the fundamental difference is in the stance. We're looking at more of a half-facing stance, which makes the side kick, and in
Yeah.
particular the defensive side kick, much harder. So you'll sometimes see people getting to hands and rushing directly, and as long as you mistime the back kick, shall we say, if the back kick isn't timed correctly, the defensive side kick isn't really going to be there either. You're going to be a little bit too open. But when you throw that turning kick, if you miss, you have a very, very nice opportunity to throw a defensive side kick or back kick following it up.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, once the shot itself is thrown, everything is open because you've arrived in a half facing kind of stance and all of your shots are available.
Yeah, like that's the big point that you have to make. The stance is what allows this to happen. If you're very side on, the turning kick is not the same angle that we're looking for here, especially for a body off the back leg. So it's something that becomes available because of the stance. So that's another factor as well. The people who can change stance and their foot position on the front foot in particular have that variety that they can link up multiple shots.
And I think in this kind of era, I think this is the 2010 European Championships, and we can see
Mm-hmm.
Neil Ernest on the right, Hong Louis on the left. Neil has, he's brought in more of the side kick kind, the side facing stance, although he does transition between them and bring in his turning kicks as well. Where Hong really at this point in his career doesn't use side kick, not a
No.
true side kick anyway. And he's the one who's having to struggle to find angles. He's looking for a way around the side kick. He's trying to create opportunities. And when he does get in with hands, when he does get a back kick off, it lets him open up and become the fighter that we kind of know him for, in terms of the free flowing kitchen sink style of approach. Whereas Neil is at this stage, I suppose, a little bit more secure behind the side kick, a little tidier, not so many openings, and looking to score more in singles and in short bursts of combinations unless he can get to hand. So we're starting to see that transition to where the front leg dominant style of the 2010s and whatever became the thing.
Yeah, again, just when that scoreboard was coming into play. But yeah, that's a great point. And I think as well, like the turning kick in particular as a main entry does open up more of a fighting style, that more of
Yes.
aggressive style. And we have noticed, especially this year, that there's a bit more flow in ITF from what we've seen at the Euros and at the World Cup also. That
Yeah.
is something we complained about for a while, that there was a lot of stop start, especially from the referees who are looking to in kind of insert their will almost to say that they're well capable to be a solid referee. But then we kind of see that step back a little bit again, and now there's a lot more flow, and we're seeing people appreciate that and getting in there and being able to flow with the shots that they want to flow with, and be able to have 2s and 3s and 4s, not just single shots.
And I do think at the World Cup, the introduction of the South American nations and we'll say the near Asian countries as well, your Uzbekistan and so on,
Mm-hmm.
bringing slightly different shots into the mix, slightly different options, and attempting different things did mean that sometimes you had that like back leg turning kick thrown that left the continuation available. It wasn't someone has exited, someone has fallen, or both sides have bashed and you're stuck, which has often happened at the European Championships over the last number of years. And people taking maybe higher risk, higher reward shots has left, I think, the opportunity for a little bit more continuation as well.
Yeah, I think like when you look at the turning kick as well, it only becomes a shot that you can use when you're leading the dance, let's say. If you're the person who is kind of like second fiddle to the other person, it's very hard to get this off and be effective with it. You almost have to be dragging them around and pulling them. So I think that linking up the movement and the footwork is actually a big factor of this as well, because you're never
Mm.
going to be just able to launch off it and be able to be successful with it multiple times, because people will find it out really quick. Like you can just
No
cut
matter
right
how
down the middle.
fast you are, that's true. Yeah.
Yeah.
So let's have a look at a couple of guys from a very recent competition. So these clips are from Irish Cup in November in University of Limerick Arena, and we have James Toot in blue and Thomas Fogarty in red. And we see that blindside turning kick from a short stance, which James and a few other people have made quite a bit of use out of over the last little while and are getting really good purchase on because it's a very clear 3-pointer when it lands.
Yeah, he brings this from a very short stance. And we've seen how Alameen was able to disguise his stance 2 videos ago.
With
And
a
I think
step in.
James actually does very, very similar way to be able to launch in. So here we see come right under with that turning kick as well. Great body position, the way he like crouches down and gets it. And again, we see what we talked about earlier. He's able to then have a defensive side kick or a back kick because of that, because they link up quite well, especially if you launch in. The opponent is usually going to come to hands if you invite that turning kick.
We have the other kind of options here as well, making the angles. Not a successful score on this attempt, but you can see as well how when you do take those choices, you potentially leave yourself open. The continuation of this kind of shows it. So when you throw the turning kick, you're leaving yourself open. If your opponent can come through to hands, they should have the momentum advantage from there.
Yeah, one big
So
difference I notice, Adrian, in the turning kick is these days people are inclined to get out faster. We see Thomas here, and then James fires right back with his own. But we don't see people trying to go to hands too long. So it's usually 2, 3 shots off the hands with punches, and then they're looking for that turning kick to the body usually, or even to the head, what we see recently as well in the World Cup. So it's usually that 1, 2, 3 max, and then bang, they're out. So it's really, really fast of how they're getting to the body with that turning kick now off the hands.
yeah, and we can see the back leg taken here by James, but it does expose him to the follow on then from Thomas, where you might make your distance absolutely perfect, nail that turning kick, but if you don't have an exit strategy from there, you're very very open to the hands as the fight continues. So,
Mm-hmm.
but it's interesting that the guys have taken that, because that I wouldn't have said was particularly characteristic of Thomas.
Yeah.
Maybe more so James. Like James certainly, over the last couple of years has had that front leg turning kick and has been finding his way around the opponent's front leg using a back leg turning kick as well. Where Thomas, I would have said, has been all about finishing with that turning kick. Well able to
Mm.
throw, well able to find a good target for it, but has been more about finishing. And maybe he's just found himself counter fighting more as he's moved up the weight division.
I wonder as well, Adrian, is it a factor of we've seen the psychic being used a lot in loads of clips we've done in Fight Chat Friday over the last maybe year, let's say. And we have noticed that like every time that one lands, it could take 7, 8, 9 attempts of throwing a psychic to actually nail one.
Yeah.
So I wonder just in terms of efficiency as well, that these guys are recognizing that maybe for the 1 or 2 turning kicks you throw, there's more chance of them landing. especially if you can use them in the way we've seen here with some good examples in variety. So I wonder, is that another factor as well? We see a lot of people pushing off the front leg, and there's a lot of other reasons to do that as well. Take space, gain some momentum, whatever, and maybe set up into the hands to change the distance. But I wonder now, is it as well just a sense of efficiency that these guys are able to pick these shots and get scores and get returns on the scoreboard easier than what they can use on the front leg?
Yeah, you definitely get to the point where you have to add some unpredictability to the event in order to be able to kind of, continue to get scores. And bringing the back leg into play, whether it's the turning kick, a back kick, a reverse turning kick, or downward kick, whatever it happens to be, when we're coming from a point in time where I think people were so side facing and so front leg dominant, getting the back leg into play one way or another opens up options and complicates the decision making process for the opponent. And if you're going to have your opponent make errors, you need to make them make decisions under pressure, and you need to add in variability. You need to add in, change the dynamic of the match a little bit. And I think
Yeah.
that's what people are experimenting with now.
Yeah, I think so, because like the top level guys, they're not really getting caught too often with psychics because the distance is that little bit further out. Everyone understands it. Now, the people who are really, really sharp on it, they're able to score. But again, it's coming maybe at a ratio of 10 shots for one landing. So maybe that is another factor, because we see a lot of people using the backhand as a counter now as well for the
Yeah,
side kick. So maybe people are thinking, okay, maybe I'm not going to actually have that as the main focal point of my game. Use it when necessary to leave space, to close down the distance, whatever it may be, but not have it as my main go-to and the main staple of my game.
for sure. Um, I'm not sure what the next iteration is going to be, or what way people will take it next. But I'm always excited to see when people are starting to innovate, and and even if it's just rolling back the wheel to see what comes next. Look at what worked before; it will work again. We still have the same two
Yep.
arms and two legs that we've always had.
Mm-hmm.
So it just, who's going to be the person who takes the chance? And in my mind, as I look at this is kind of like we turn the dial on efficiency as high as we can get. And we only do the shots that keep us safe, that are, it's like, to take a rugby analogy, when you go with a possession kicking game and you're playing for territory. Um, in the Taekwondo sense, that's stay safe, push for control of the center of the ring, try and force errors from your opponent, and be patient. Where going the other direction says, well, okay, but how about if I look to outscore my opponent? And yeah, they'll get scores, but I'll score more. And it opens up a whole other style. And the
Yeah.
more different styles that are viable, the more exciting the game is to watch.
Yeah. No, that is a good point. I wonder where it's going to go next, because like we are seeing changes frequently now as well. We've seen like even the hands being used way more efficiently in the World Cup just gone by, with some people maybe not winning but getting to medal stages without even throwing many kicks.
Yeah,
So
for
like people
sure.
are coming up with their own styles and a lot of things that do work. So it's going to be exciting to see what is next around the corner in terms of the meta game of ITF sparring.
Absolutely. So, thinking of around the corner, our next episode is the last one of 2022, and we're looking to do a bit of an exciting recap on some of the, I suppose, the signature shots, or the shots to watch from 2022. So, I suppose also a little bit of a call out to anyone who's watching there. If you have something that you think you've started to see be effective in 2022, or a shot that you haven't seen in a little while that people have started using, definitely send on any examples to us so we can have a look at it and add it to our batch of shots to watch for 2022, as a little bit of a look back over the competitions that were in the last 12 months.
Yeah, that'll be a good one. I'm excited for that.
Cool. All right, folks. Well, that's all we have for today. So hopefully we'll catch you on the 30th, and have a great week and enjoy your Christmas.
Yeah, we'll see you in the next one, guys. Thanks for watching.